All right. Hey, welcome so much, everybody. Happy Friday. It is Friday. It is 4 p.m. Pacific. It's time for another Pathfinder Friday. And today, we're going to be doing a recap because we just finished Chapter 5, the Heroes of Undarin.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And to do that, we've got Jason Bulmahn in the house, air horns, peer, 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 all of that sort of thing. I can't do air horns.
That was almost well, like the ba, 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 ba. Yeah, no,
yeah, exactly.
That's great.
But anyway, yeah, thanks. Happy Friday, everyone. It's good to see you. So today the idea is that we're going to do a recap of Chapter 5, which just finished yesterday. If you haven't had a chance, you can watch that on YouTube Monday and Tuesday, or in our highlights on Twitch. So feel free to do that. Either way, whatever. Enjoy it. It's good. But we're assuming you've already seen it, so there might be some spoilers if you haven't, and apologies in advance if you didn't want spoilers. You've got time to turn away if you can.
Avert your eyes.
But good luck. Good luck. I mean,
face melting is about to happen.
We've got a good show, and you know it, and so we're going to be doing that thing. So first off, Jason, thanks for running the show.
Thanks.
The last 2 weeks, it was
happy
good.
to. Yeah, no, it's good times.
I got a couple things I want to ask you about this, though.
Oh boy. Yeah.
So first of all, we know that every chapter has a certain thing that it's trying to test.
Yeah.
We put this together so we get this information.
That's right.
What was the purpose of Chapter 5, the Heroes of Undarin?
All right, so just to be clear,
yeah,
spoilers. It's the spoilers, so here we go. I mean, it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone who's read it or even played it. The goal of Part 5 was to kill you. That was kind of the entire point. We needed to see when characters finally broke. How hard could they be pushed? To what extreme could they be pushed? At which point we basically were forcing a total party kill, a TPK.
Yeah.
And when we were first building Doomsday Dawn and putting it together, we always knew that there had to be some point in time where we intentionally tried to overstress the characters to the point of breaking. We also kind of knew that that would not be very popular amongst most people playing, but it was something that we needed to have for our playtest feedback to be valid.
Right. So the idea is, let's put a chapter together. We know they're going to die.
Yeah.
But we also, understandably so, we know that that's not going to be received very well.
Yeah.
And so
it's a bit of, we tried to create at least a narrative structure where you felt like your characters were sacrificing themselves for the greater good. Right. That these heroes were going, down below to get this precious rare artifact, and you needed to hold the line. You needed to protect them as long as you possibly could from the advancing monsters, and that in that service you might be asked to lay down your life, and that is something you were prepared to do. So we kind of tried to give you some warning that was about to happen. I think on the whole, most of the feedback we've gotten has been relatively positive on that front, in that they understood, at least. But at the end of each survey, we do ask kind of, rate this part of the adventure, and yeah, the ratings for this one are not as high as the other ones, but we kind of knew that going in, that people were going to view it a lot more negatively because they died.
So overall satisfaction, we think, was down because they died.
What was down, but predictably so. I think, it's something we keep an eye on, and we wanted to, we can actually tease apart when people died and rate their look at their satisfaction based on when they said they died and stuff. So we can get some interesting information out of elements like that. But it also showed us an awful lot about how our encounter design was working, and how character resiliency was playing as it relates to how we put together monster encounters, especially at higher levels, which is a place where typically the game has kind of started to break and not function properly. So the higher we get, the more data we're getting on that front, and it's showing us some really interesting stuff.
Okay, and now speaking of useful data that's gathered by having everybody in the party die.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that your playthrough for the last 2 weeks ended up with no usable data, because in fact the party did not die as you were playing.
So,
Kristen, how are you? Welcome.
Yeah, as it turns out, for the stream here in the office, we knew we weren't going to be able to run the whole thing. The entire adventure is a lot of encounters, because you can't kill characters with just 3 encounters unless you throw something at them that's just ridiculously unfair. And even the final encounter of this is just on the edge of doability for characters, according to the guidelines. Like, it's supposed to be lethal, but you could survive.
Right. And it was even written in there, if by chance they survive, here's the text.
There's an entire piece for that.
Right.
So ultimately, for the needs of the stream, I had to cut out about half the encounters. I tried to simulate that a bit by having them lose some of their resources for the playtest we were doing here. It's clear that that wasn't quite enough to simulate all that they might have lost. They still had too many resources left for the test to properly work. But that's okay. We were really kind of here to just demonstrate kind of how some of the pieces of this work, how the characters might survive. And they did a great job. I have to hand it to them too. They did come prepared for a fight.
I think first of all, they were dropping 20s. Like, they were critting a lot. Like, I think I even put in the chat, it's like, usually it's one person is just rolling rocks and just taking care of, like, helping the rest of the table. It's like everybody at that table was just doing so good.
In that last fight, they needed to roll like 18s plus with a shockingly high number of, like, most of their checks needed to be like, get an 18. And it was a table of 4, and I would get 3 people who would make it. And I'm like, well, that's a statistical outlier, but all right.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's all in fun, right? I mean, that's why we roll dice. That's why we don't just say, well, this happens because we decided. So we have to roll some dice and figure out how things play.
So then, and I noticed that it looked like for a while it was like, oh, Linda's character is gonna shuffle off first, but then she bounced back because barbarian.
Yeah.
And it was like you dished out some damage at one point, and you were like, so are you unconscious? And she's like, no. Yeah. Barbarian. It's like, oh, that's right.
Well,
barbarian.
She had over 200 hit points, so it was kind of hard to take her down. She had the most hit points in the group. So
it was good.
But her lower AC made that a bit of an easier task, especially with the Shemazian at the end. It was dropping crits on her left and right.
Yeah. And I think that and then once she recovered, then it looked like somebody else was gonna start to fade away from the party, and then they bounced back. I thought Mark's character was gonna be.
They had actually whittled me down quite a bit, and they happened to have 1 or 2 things that just allowed them to ping me constantly. Without those things, the odds that they would have been able to take that thing down are very small.
Right.
But they just happen to have the right tools for the job. And it happens, right? And that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to be honest, that's part of our calculation too. Like, we've started to look at the early survey data from this, and it is still early. And I do want to stress that if you're GMing and you haven't finished this or you haven't submitted your results yet, please, by all means, do. We need more data. But the early survey results for this is showing a pretty high casualty rate. So a lot of groups aren't even making it to that end encounter, but because we skipped a bunch, we could kind of see how it played. It was fun.
Yeah. And speaking of the method of destruction.
Yeah, that's right.
This thing right
here. The Shemazian demon,
The Shemazian demon, which is called, in the book, it's called a mutation? Mutilation. And this is such a great mini. When it came time to pack it up and all of the stuff, it was like, hey, what are you gonna do? I mean, you already opened it. You can't.
You can't
sell it.
That's it. Yeah.
And then you looked at me, you're like, well, it's been taken out of inventory.
Yeah. So I guess if that accidentally lives here now.
So this is gonna stay here for a while, and then what do we do with it? I don't know. Maybe some of these things, maybe we have folks sign them, and then we
raffle them off or something.
Give them away for the extra live stream taking place on November 3rd and 4th, 25 hours right here at twitch.tv/official Paizo.
There you go.
Yeah,
you got it.
Join us. We might be giving away some of that stuff. So, but yeah, this is just an incredible.
That thing's a monster. Yeah, it's a beast. It is not light.
So what else stood out from the last 2 weeks of gameplay that you would want to mention? There was a lot of stuff happening. So
I think in the past 2 weeks of the playtest, obviously we're focused on wrapping up Heroes of Undarin, and Monday we're going to move on to Red Flags, which is part 6. We also dropped on this past Monday. We dropped a resonance test.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
This was a big deal.
Which is in the Pathfinder Society, Raiders of Shrieking Peak.
That's right.
Is where that's being done with the pre-gens.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the resonance system is something that's kind of baked into a lot of the game, and we always kind of knew that it was one of the more experimental things, and a lot of the early feedback was pretty negative. Folks didn't like the way it worked. So we took a hard look at the system. We started playing with some various ways that we might look at addressing resonance, that we might change it or play around with different components of it. And we decided that we wanted to get more data on that. We came up with a new system called Focus that allows you to boost some spells and some magic items as you use them. But all the items are otherwise perfectly functional. They still do what they're supposed to do. This is just a way to get more out of them.
Right.
But we knew that we also couldn't test the entire system. First of all, the full implementation of it isn't something that we fully understand yet. That we would have to figure out how that bakes into every class. There are some classes that would want more focus that don't currently have the tools to get it. There's a lot of different ways that the focus system isn't fully implemented. And we honestly just didn't have the time to kind of write all those pieces, get them packaged up, and get them out for everybody. And it would be an update document that was huge, which we're trying to be sensitive to the fact that players have to be able to synthesize this data.
Right.
If we give them too much, it starts to look like the book that they have is kind of worthless, and they might as well just grab a new PDF. So we're trying to make sure that we're sensitive to that we're just testing limited pieces, and focus is one of those. So the ultimate call was decided to make changes to Raiders of the Shrieking Peak and the pre-gens. That way we only had to change the things that were in that adventure. So if you haven't gotten a chance to play with the new resonance and focus system yet, we really, really, really need you to. This is something that's really important to our data. We don't have enough data yet to make decisions. Now, it's only been a week. But the more data we can get, the better. So if you get a chance, go download Raiders of the Shrieking Peak, the PDF file. The package now comes with an additional PDF that contains all of the rules for the new system, plus all of the pre-gens with the new rules applied to them. You can test that out and get a sense of what we're thinking about for the system. There's a lot of people who have looked at that and tried to extrapolate what it might mean for the broader world.
Right.
And that's certainly interesting and useful, but right now we really do want to focus in on play the adventure, use the rules as written, and give us your feedback. Until we have more concrete data, we can't decide kind of what direction to go.
Right. Kind of a thing where don't hate it until after you've played it.
Well, and I mean, it's a tricky subject, right? The original system is one that evoked a lot of kind of fierce emotion in some people. They really didn't like the original system. They felt it flew in the face of some of the way that magic items work. We get that. We understand that. I think when it comes to the new system, if you approach it with that same level of like, well, I hated the old one, so undoubtedly this is going to be bad, well, we're not going to get good data that way.
Right.
We really do kind of need you to play it and see whether or not it is actually a shift and change. And if it's not, we want to know that, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Because we don't want to keep making the wrong decision, but we do want to see whether or not if we nudge it in one way, if we nudge it in another, if we change it from being just a hard cap limit on the number of, potions and scrolls you can use to instead a way that you can boost the potions and scrolls that you have, is that a more palatable way for you to kind of utilize your magic items without overusing them and overtaxing the play space? Which is kind of where our problem is with magic items from first edition, is that depending on how permissive your GM was or how much you did crafting, you could really have kind of a weirdly distorted play environment where certain characters had an awful lot of magic at their disposals and others had none. There was just some things that the game couldn't predict very well, and we're trying to see if we can't get that a little bit more cohesive.
And that all comes out by getting this data, by hearing.
Without the data, we kind of can't make the right decision. I mean, we can make a decision. We just aren't sure whether or not it's the right decision. So, the more data, the better. That's kind of true of everything we're doing.
Right. And then because it comes with pre-gens, can you use your own characters and still give good data?
No, not really. Unfortunately, we because we're not giving you enough of the pieces, I mean, you could maybe kit bash it where you make a character the same level and use the exact pieces that we gave you if you really wanted to play your own character. But that's a bit more kit bashing than I'm sure most people would like to do. It really is there for the pre-gens. I know a lot of people don't like playing pre-gens. I get that.
Yeah.
But this is really just for one test, and we just kind of want to get a sense of the feel of the system. And in fact, you using pre-gens kind of eliminates other biases from creeping in, like, oh, I built a character who specifically can't use this system, hence I don't like it. And we're not saying we don't understand that that's a possibility, but that doesn't really give us useful data that there is a corner case that exists. We know that that's there, and that doesn't mean we can't plan for it, but until we know whether or not the system as a whole is right, we don't know how to adjust for it.
Right.
It's kind of, playtesters love to jump 3 steps ahead and try and extrapolate from what they're seeing where a thing is going. And that can sometimes be very illustrative of where players as a whole think about a system, but sometimes it's not very useful for our testing purposes. So it's always a trick.
Okay.
So we'll see how it goes. Right now we're starting to get some data. It's starting to firm up, but we need more. So this is kind of my call. Please play Raiders of the Shrieking Peak.
If there was a 1-800 number,
that's
could
right.
put down
no,
here,
it'd
then
be scrolling on the bottom.
It would just be right there for you, but we don't have that.
Yeah.
I didn't build that Chiron in my in the stream deck.
We'll work on it. Yeah.
But and then on top of that, once we start getting data for that, and I assume that feedback is going to be open for as long as the other feedback will be open. So
all of the surveys are staying open until the end of the playtest.
Good to know. Let's talk about updates.
Sure.
We had an update a couple weeks ago.
That's right.
1.4.
Yep.
I believe it was.
Which, update 1.4 changed a fair bit about ancestries.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah. And we're doing these updates every 2 weeks.
Yep.
The resonance thing that came out on Monday was kind of not a part of a regular update.
It's not technically an update because we're not updating the engine. We're just updating one adventure. So
Gotcha.
We didn't call that an update. That was just a special resonance test on a very special Pathfinder playtest.
Oh, man. All right. We grew up in the sitcom era.
That's
obviously.
right. Yeah, no, it's true.
So we have an update coming. 1.5 is coming on Monday.
1.5,
And generally, those of you that have tracked with us for a while, you know that before we do an update that's coming, Jason likes to do a little thing called the top 5 updates that are coming on Monday. And so, Jason, did you bring 5 things that you can talk about that's coming on Monday? He says, ignoring the piece of paper.
I did.
Oh my God.
I did. In fact, I do have 5 things.
You know what's weird? We actually folded our papers. This was done off camera, but we folded our papers.
Twinsies. All right. So.
I know I'm all flustered. It's warm in here. So let's talk about the top 5 updates that are coming on Monday. And by the way, chat. So what's going on right now, there's a really interesting conversation that I definitely want to have after we finish this this part. When we get into the Q&A, I definitely want to talk about the idea of playtest fatigue because I hear you, and I think we need to talk about that. So keep that in your back pocket, folks. We're going to get to that.
Absolutely.
In the meantime, Jason,
sure.
What do you got for us?
Let's talk about some updates. So I do want to start out by saying we've gotten some folks who have seen our updates, and they take a good look at them, and they're like, wow, I'm seeing these things change. And they're like, but I'm still concerned about this part of the game or that part of the game, and I'm not seeing updates about it.
Right.
And I can understand why that might be a little frustrating because it is, right?
Yes, it is.
I think, one of the things that we're trying to do is manage the playtest as a process. Right? Which is understanding that if we change too much too quickly, playtesters can't keep up. You want to talk about playtest fatigue, updates really contribute to that pretty quickly.
Absolutely, yes.
It's not that we have to kind of balance the difference between making sure that the players understand that we're taking their feedback seriously and making changes based on it, while also giving everyone a stable game that they can actually test. And that's a difficult line to walk. We're not always getting it right. And that's I think where we see some of the biggest stress with playtesters is that they want to see more change, but they also want to, be able to play the game and not have a 60-page update.
Yeah.
That is making it so that every 2 weeks they have to learn and unlearn huge parts of the game. That's hard enough for us to do, and we're pros, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many different versions of rules I've got floating around in my head.
Yeah.
So we try to keep the updates concise, straightforward, and focused on things that we want more data on.
Yes, absolutely.
And 1.5 is no exception.
See, I knew we were getting there.
Yeah. So, top change number 5. We're going to count down.
Oh, good. See, okay.
I'm counting down. We've counted up in the past.
Yeah.
I'm counting down this time.
I don't want to call out a previous guest, but some people completely did it backwards.
That is ridiculous, and it is going to go in their employee review.
No, I feel bad. It was nobody on your team. It was an outside guest. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
I know who it was.
Number 5.
All right, so this one is actually not really a rules change, but for those of you using the updates, you have learned that the updates continue to amalgam all of the updates that came before it. So update 1.2 contains update 1.1 and 1.0 in it. 1.5 contains 1.4, 1.3, 1.2.
Yeah, it's all mashed in there together.
So, but as that means these things have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And what we were also doing was including the entire text of the rules change for the major rules, and then later including a page-by-page reference of every place that the rule changed. That made these documents really big and really unwieldy and really confusing.
Right.
We've gone through and removed a bunch of redundancies in there.
Okay.
So the document is getting smaller this time around, even though it has more changes, and all of the changes are still in it. That should make it easier for everybody to use.
Okay.
That's the hope anyway.
Good.
So that's number 5. Number 4. We made some changes, and I'm not going to give any spoilers.
Okay.
We made some changes to a few encounters in Doomsday Dawn, parts 6 and 7, because we're worried that there may be a few encounters in there that are a little bit too tough, and we've made some small adjustments to them. Right. So if you're about to run either part 6 or 7, make sure you grab 1.5 on Monday. For those who are going to run red flags, I guess sooner than that, maybe we'll throw something up in the jam board here after this, just to make sure people know where it is.
That'd be pretty handy.
Those aren't something too scary or terrifying or anything. They're just some adjustments we decided to make to the adventure.
Right. Okay. So that's number 4.
Yeah. Okay. And I should stress that this week's update is a little light. We're trying to play this one a little light, but there is one very impactful thing on here, and it's further down. But let's do number 3.
Number 3. I'm hearing a drum roll in my head. I can't help it.
One of these days we'll get the sound effect. All right, so the DC for treat wounds is being changed to now be determined by the highest level of the character being treated. Before, it was being determined by the person doing the treating, which meant that it always kind of was just this static number based on you. Now it's being changed to, if you're a high-level person with medicine, using medicine on a bunch of low-level characters, you're almost certainly going to succeed and probably even crit.
Right.
Because you are super skilled and they are low-level and easy to patch up.
Right. Okay.
I don't think that we consider that to be a final change or anything for treat wounds. Treat wounds is still a system that we're going to be looking very deeply at going into the future. Right now, it's kind of serving a purpose, but we know that purpose is not quite what we want to see out of it in the finale. We're just trying to gather some data on it right now before we make any final decisions.
Okay.
But this is a step in a direction. Okay.
Number 2.
Number 2.
All right.
The role, we are making another alteration to death and dying.
Okay.
This one to make it a lot simpler. We've tinkered with death and dying a lot through the playtest. And the most recent change made it so that when you recover from dying, you gain the wounded condition, which means that the next time you go unconscious, your dying value increases.
Okay.
Playtest feedback on that has been very positive. People think that it really does help the yo-yoing effect of I go up, I keep going down, and I never actually have any threat of dying. That is no longer the case. Once you have wounded 2 or 3, your chances of dying are very high.
Okay. All right.
However, the thing people still find confusing is that the DC for determining your saving throw is determined by the monster. Now, we like that rule for a couple of reasons, but we also understand that it can be difficult for people to adjudicate. So as a test, and this is one that we very well might roll back, we are changing it to a flat check instead of a fortitude save.
Okay.
So it just becomes a die roll. And the DC of the check is modified by your dying value. So the more dying you are, the harder it is to make the save.
Okay. All right. Interesting. What do we expect that means in the short term? Like, what are we looking?
We don't actually think that'll give us more player deaths. What we think is that it may just improve overall satisfaction with the way death works.
Okay.
Because it's easier for people to adjudicate at the table.
Right.
But we also think that we could also solve it by just including a dying DC on the monster as part of its ability DC, and that might just solve the problem too. So. We're kind of A/B testing this. We want to see how this works versus how the previous one works and see whether or not satisfaction changes at all.
Right.
This one's a bit more predictable, which players might like, but it's also a little less interesting on the GM side. So, but GM's also had more work to do with it. So it's an open question. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, but we're saying this is kind of just testing this right now. Like, our toe is in the water.
Yeah, well, we think it's a good change, but we also think it's a change that we could go a different way. It's techie, but it's not terribly techie. It's just different. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
The number one change.
Number one. Hit the drum rolls now.
That's right.
Okay.
The number one change happening in Update 1.5 is we have gone through and done a tuning pass on all of, well, let me rephrase that.
No.
We've done a tuning pass on the majority of the damage dealing spells in the game.
Right.
Increasing their damage. So we've been getting a lot of feedback that the spells in the game right now, as they currently function, are a little underpowered. That people feel that they're not quite getting enough out of them. We're looking at that system and we agree. However, this is a very complicated system to fix.
Right.
There are a lot of spells that do a lot of different things. And it's really hard for us right now to adjust all of the spells. But there is one category of spells that we can adjust without too much trouble. And that's the spells that deal damage.
Okay.
So, because all it requires us to do is look them all up and change their damage values.
Right.
So, Update 1.5 contains a list that's about, I think it's about 30 or 40 spells long.
Okay.
That changes their damage values. And let me give everybody at home some examples to tide you over until Monday.
Right. So this is just a few. This isn't all of them by any.
This is I'm gonna give you 3.
Okay. Let's get 3.
3. Out of probably I think about 30 or 40.
Okay.
Burning Hands, first level spell, did do 2d6 fire damage. Now does 3d6 fire damage. So it gained an extra d6.
Okay. All right.
Yep. I should also note that all of these spells also generally scale. So if you prepare them as a higher level spell, they scale. This change does not affect the scaling. It just affects the base damage.
Okay.
Now the base damage is added to by the scaling. So it does affect all the scaled up levels, but there's no actual change to the amount that's adjusted when you scale.
Right. Okay. All right. And that's a pretty significant scale that you've added there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Chain Lightning was 7d12.
Yeah.
The primary target was 7d12.
I don't know. Jason, can you do better than that?
I can.
Oh.
Funny you should ask.
We're going to turn this.
How would you like 9d12 damage down?
So that is significant.
9d12. That is an average extra 13 points of damage.
Yeah, which is big.
To the primary target, yeah.
Okay, all right. So Chain Lightning.
All right.
Amazing.
So we started with Burning Hands. That was at the bottom of the spell list.
Yeah.
First level spell.
Right.
Let's do a 9th level spell.
Yeah, let's dedicate this to Kimlak in the chat.
That's right.
Go for it.
All right, Kimlak. You decide to cast Meteor Swarm.
There it is.
And it used to do 3d10.
Okay.
Bludgeoning damage from the meteors hitting people. And those meteors would then explode and do 14d6 damage. Well, that's clearly not enough. That's not enough. I can't imagine that anybody would want that small amount of damage, Dan.
I'm sorry, I just fell asleep listening to that.
Yeah.
Jason, Please, wake me up.
Well, let me wake you up by instead dealing 4d10 bludgeoning damage. So an extra
amazing.
d10.
Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay.
it's good.
An extra d10 bludgeoning damage isn't bad. But let's amp up that fire damage too. Let's take that from 14d6 all the way up to 19d6. Many of you don't even own 19d6. I doubt you'll need to go to the game store, buy some extra d6. So that's kind of a sample of what we're doing. There's obviously other things like Fireball went from 6d6 to 8d6. Oh, I just gave you a fourth one. What am I doing?
See, everything must go.
I can't even follow my own rules. So that's kind of some of the things that we're doing with spells. Obviously, if some of these tunings go over well, and we think they probably will, because who doesn't want spells that deal more damage, we'll probably be looking at all the other spells as well to find out ways to tune them. Whether or not we can do that in the playtest in a responsible way is still kind of an open question, but this at least should give us some testing data on the overall power of spells to see whether or not that's a bit more satisfactory. There's kind of three levers on that. There's the number of spells per day, there's the power level of individual spells, and then there's the scaling of spells, and we're trying to see which of those levers we can adjust to kind of give spells the right amount of power.
Okay, so, all right,
we're on it.
Yeah,
we've heard you. We get a lot of feedback on spells and spell power, and we're going to work to make that better.
Yes, and thank you for the previews.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on that bombshell, we're going to go ahead and say goodbye. Like, that was 30 minutes.
That was 30 minutes.
Yeah. So let's do this, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a blast. If you'd like to know more about this, please feel free to go to pathfinderplaytest.com, and there's plenty of information. There's forums, there's downloads, there's all kinds of fun things that you can get there. A lot of the designers and developers are on the message boards, and so there's a good chance that they're going to see what you have to say. So feel free to do that. And in the meantime, thank you as always for joining us. If you liked the video, hit the like button. That helps us a lot. And if you'd like to stay up to date on when we upload videos to YouTube, subscribe and hit the bell notification button. That also helps us a lot. And so for Jason Bulmahn and for Paizo and for me, your old pal Dan, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again. Bye. Wave, Jason.
Bye-bye.
Bye.